Spinning. It looks like we are live. Welcome in, everyone, and hopefully you guys are having a wonderful, happy freaking New Year. Before we kind of get started, let's just go around the horn, just kind of see what everybody's playing right now. If you're having time to play, I've been building snowmen with the kids this today, but that's about it.
Yeah, I've been playing a lot of Final Fantasy XIV, no surprise there. And then in my off time, as it were, been playing Pokemon Pocket TCG, which has been fun.
What's that?
It's basically just the Pokemon card game, but in a mobile app. But it's slightly a trimmed down version of it. It's like a speed version of it. And as someone who collected the cards when I was younger but never played the game, it is the perfect amount of I want to play like a little phone game for 10, 20 minutes a day. Collect some cards and have a good time and be done with it.
Okay.
They just give you cards for like dailies?
Yeah, you get, I think it's something like 2 packs a day of 5 cards. And honestly, having spent only a couple bucks.
How many packs Pokemon do you have today?
Straight up. Well, I think they made like billions of dollars in the first week, and half of it or more was just out of Japan. So.
Okay. Cool. I picked up Balatro. So I heard all the hype, and I finally.
All right. Did it pay off? Did the hype pay off for Balatro?
If it's dollar per hour, it did. I've put at least 10 hours into that game. It's a $10 game, so I've enjoyed it quite a bit. I wish there was more. Leave it to the MMO player, but I wish there was more of a collecting element.
Sure.
Where I could maybe go into a mode that was a little less like.
Yeah.
Reset each time, where I could get a little more powerful, just to see how far I could go.
Yeah.
But because it's right on that line where like I can't always play around in one sitting, but I also, the rounds don't last quite as long as I would like sometimes. You kind of just you get a bad hand, and then
you're just like,
it's really hard to come back from if there's the wrong modifier. For anybody that doesn't know what it is, there's various regulatory bodies that think it's teaching kids poker, which is bad, as opposed to when we have kids gambling and not labeling it poker, which is fine.
Yeah.
I guess. So, but you're playing poker hands, but then you're modifying them in a roguelite state. So you're adding multipliers and you're adding upgrades to different hands, and you're increasing the likelihood where you might slowly convert most of a deck to being spades and then have like a really leveled up flush. So every time you get a flush, but then each round you're like fighting these like series of like bosses. And so it gets more powerful and then it resets. It gets more powerful and then it resets. These as you go through the ante, and there can be rules like modifiers where you're fighting a boss and it's like, okay, so you've leveled up your flush, but you're only allowed to do 1 flush this time around.
Yeah.
And then you need to, so it's just enough in like kind of trying to process the odds in my head and stuff like that I really enjoy it. I found it to be a lot of fun.
I will say, if they put Balatro in casinos, I would definitely. There is a chance I would do more gambling. That is the one thing I will give.
Who knows?
That they actually made.
Maybe,
especially if they had you like track a little account where like your cosmetics came with you and stuff. Like, there was that golf.
I think that's
game,
how they get.
You'd spin the wheel and like you had an account that you logged in, or like Gauntlet Legends, and you could like log in on the arcade and like progress your character as long as you're willing to continue dumping an unlimited amount of quarters into it.
There you go. We solved it. We now know. XQuest Gaming says they picked up old school RuneScape. Wish there was less collecting in that game. Speaking of old school MMOs, that's really much like what I've been spending a little bit of time with. Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, and I played that a lot last night on my Steam Deck, trying to get the controller just right, and making some progress, but got a lot of work to do in that regards. We'll probably talk a little bit more about that actually when we kick off our show, because I want to get y'all's opinions about the Ashes. Obviously, that like the Final Fantasy 14 stuff is like, what do people expect? This is like numbers go up, numbers go down, but that is really what it's going to be about. And then we also got Switch 2 news. So we're going to be talking about that. I think probably we'll open up with Switch 2 because I'm really excited to get y'all's thoughts, especially because
the most leaked console of all time.
Yeah, well, it's the joke is like it's the if you're a YouTuber, you have to talk about Switch 2 or Switch Pro in January, because it's always like every January, that's all my feed ever is about. Is this the year of the Switch 2? And this actually might be the year the Switch 2 comes out.
It is.
But,
yeah,
which is fine. Then next January we'll get to talk about the Switch 3 or the Switch 2 Pro.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm expecting to happen. It's like, all right, guys, when's the light version coming out? And they're going to talk about that.
I mean, it's the same thing with games, though, right? Like everyone's waiting for Tears of the Kingdom, and everyone's waiting for the next Zelda, or everyone's waiting for Elden Ring, and then everyone's waiting for Elden Ring DLC, and then it's always
Elden Ring.
GTA is the one I'm not at all in touch with that has just such a big following.
Yeah,
like such an astounding following. As somebody that did play the game, right, as opposed to when there's a huge following for a game that's not my genre at all and I've never played it, it's like, well, it is what it is. Like you don't watch everything, but like I played it, I don't understand the replayability that other people get out of it.
Yeah,
GTA Online is a big part of that, and also I'll also say that I am more enthusiastically watching the insanity coming out of the GTA 6 community than I am anticipating that game at all. Like the level of madness that has been brought about is something, I'll tell you.
Man, we should probably talk about that too. I think because there's a lot to unpack there, but I'm going to go ahead and run our standard podcast intro, and we're going to kick off this new year. Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks for being here, and let's light this candle. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Crystal Core Radio Podcast. Brian joining you with the round table. We've got Elio. Welcome. Happy New Year, Elio.
Happy New Year to you.
And Gaming Kinda, aka my good friend Chris. Happy New Year to you. We were talking about you playing some Balatro on the pre-show for this. Did you pick that up on phone? Was this on a Switch?
Absolutely on phone. The more mobile a platform can be on, the better. So like if a game can go on phone, that's where I want it, because I just want it to be as many places as possible. I did also switch phone carriers, which was a big debate of last year. Is would I actually get that done? It's a real pain. You have to notify your current phone carrier that you want them to release your phone number. Then you have to uninstall the eSIM on your phone. Then you have to get the new eSIM on there. And so it turned into a much bigger thing. But that meant that I was able to save us enough money on our phone bill that the first month of savings we used to purchase a stupid mount in World of Warcraft.
Yeah. Did you already buy it, or are you?
Yes. No, it's gone now. You can't get it now.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like I knew that.
So that's what put it down to the wires. I was switching my phone carrier with like 24 hours to go on the mount. It's like, oh no.
That's some just unapologetic FOMO. It's just utterly unnecessary.
I had been asked to get us off of AT&T because it was going to save us substantial money for a long time. We used to get an employer discount tied to the company my wife worked for. And after that had dropped off, when she left that company, she's like, we've got to go somewhere. And so she had been asking me to do it. So I guess thank you, Blizzard, for giving me a really dumb reason to do something she had asked me to do so many times.
Yeah.
Whatever motivates you, right?
So
whatever can get you out and do it.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know. Isn't Ryan Reynolds their spokesperson? Why isn't Ryan Reynolds selling World of Warcraft mounts?
That would be
just switch.
That reminds me, like, what is it? Circa 2005, 2004. The what was it? The Mr. T Mohawk Night Elf Mohawk grenade commercials. You remember that? Now imagine that, but it's like Deadpool. That'd be something.
Yeah.
I'll tell you.
Well, now I've switched and I have the mount, and I don't like using it because I feel guilty about how much money it is.
How many slash spits have you gotten?
I don't use it in big cities. I don't understand that at all. People that use the auction house mount next to an auction house is just stupid. What it's useful for is you're like out in the world and your inventory's full from like running a dungeon over and over, and then you can just dump the extra transmog you're waiting to sell directly onto the auction house.
I don't think it's a pragmatic issue. I think
I don't use it in the big cities. I like being close to other players. I like that like feeling of standing in the auction house and all of that. So it's only useful to me when it when it's serving its function. That's why I was so bitter towards it. If they had just put it on a 4-hour timer and been a toy, I probably wouldn't have bought them out, because it was actually truly special functionality. And the mailbox toy is on a 4-hour timer.
Yeah. I'm so torn on that sort of stuff because convenient as all heck, but by dint of having something like that, you decrease the amount of people who are all out by the auction house. But, that's more of a, if you like, the classic style compared to the modern retail.
Do you think that's why they did it? Is that they're literally starting to have frame rate issues. Like the WoW engine is aged to the point that they're starting to get to where they can't get these big areas to run well when like everybody's got all their fancy stuff out.
I don't, because if they did, it would just put it in the game for non-money, because you're going to get more people to use it and actually diasporize people effectively if you make it part of, you go do a whole series of quests in Legion, right? Or something.
Oh, like to unlock your warband, like to make it just a big unlock feature.
Yeah, because there's no, if it's a solution to that, why would you put on a $90 mount that you're going to have a fraction of your player base buy?
I feel like there's a YouTube short from the guys making Skycraft or whatever that would explain that to us.
Sure.
As they like money. Like we can give a better experience if people give us money.
I think that demonstrably has been shown to not necessarily be the case, but I don't think there's a corollary with the amount of money they're making. I mean, there's a floor. There's definitely a floor of enough money that they need to be making, but I don't think there's been a track record of more money in the system has made things always better for World of Warcraft or any MMO necessarily.
It did make it more money, though. My God, the amount of money that they made on these things. I was filming stuff for my goal. So last year I didn't have a goal to make content, and as a result, I didn't make very much content. And this year I do have a goal to make content, so I was recording some today, and I was trouble getting game footage that doesn't have a Brutosaur in it. I was in Mulgore, and there was a freaking Brutosaur on a cliff top for no reason. Like, it doesn't need to be there, which is kind of cool that like people's bank alts can just literally be in whatever spot they think is most scenic, because you have an auction house and a mailbox. So like you can post your bank alt anywhere. My bank alt is still in Orgrimmar for no reason. I could put them anywhere. They could be on the most remote mountaintop and it would be fine.
Forgive my ignorance. Can anybody else use the mount besides you, or is it just you?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's convenient if you're checking somebody else's auction house and they get off their mount.
I will concede the point.
Bring it back.
Yeah. If other people can use it, I do think that does change up the argument a little bit in that, okay, then it becomes a utility. I still think you could, what if you made it like
a Star Citizen is not asking for money. Like the whales provide the ships for everybody else. That's your business model. We don't need everybody to be a whale, but we do need some people to be a whale.
Look, 14 is managing to like keep Square Enix alive and itself, and mainly the only thing it does is Fantasia, which, to be fair, what was it? I believe Fantasia alone. Sorry,
yeah, they're huge. But just to kind of jump in on it, one of the things that 14 is also different is that the story, you have to jump through like hoops of fire to like, they've made it easier, but it's not like in the game itself, which I think some people have said that that's their line in the sand. Like, as soon as like you can just like log in, which is convenient. Like, it is essentially like, oh, I need to I got to jump off to this website now that's not even associated with it. And now I got to put in my one-time password again. Like, like they are pumping the brakes on like, do you really want to give us some more money?
I kind of, and that's honestly part of the reason I've stayed around in 14 as long as I have. A not insignificant amount comes from the fact that they try to pump those brakes. Just as opposed to some of the like just logged in, can't even get to a quest before I'm seeing a screen with half of the other games I play, right?
Yeah.
What was it that like just the actual menus in one of the Assassin's Creed was like marketing for another Assassin's Creed game? I think it was, no, but it's crazy. I just remember when Fantasia sales alone though funded the creation of an entire server. Which is just lordy.
Everybody did their part. Now earlier Chris was talking about switching his cell phone carrier, and I thought that was a perfect way to transition into Switch 2. And then we ended up getting on the Brutosaur stuff, which is great. I think that's fantastic. But Nintendo Switch 2, we are finally into 2025. The rumor last year was that they were trying to have it come out in 2024, but delays for whatever reason, and they're going to push it back. All of the information that we seem to be getting on this is coming out of like CES with various different third-party manufacturers, kind of highlighting some of these things. When are we going to hear like official news? Because we took the kids to see my sister for Thanksgiving. Turns out my second oldest son gets car sick if he's looking at a screen, and he threw up on my Switch OLED. So the Switch piece
that is pronounced his Switch OLED now.
But the screen works. The Joy-Cons, they can't connect to Joy-Cons anymore or anything like that. So we got to use a Pro controller. And I was like, guys, we are so close to Switch 2. I don't want to replace this, and so if it doesn't come out this year, I'll be upset.
When you sell that used to GameStop, I do not look forward to being the technachician who opens that up.
Well, we got it cleaned up. Like it was like,
did you get it into the insides? Because that's the question. Having opened some of those things up, I tell you,
I haven't fully taken it apart, but we learned something because I ended up taking the kids skiing in New Mexico for over the Christmas break. And Gabe was like, can I play like a handheld? And I was like, no, you may not. Everybody else can. Here, we've got the car screen or whatever that. So as long as he's looking up like this, he's fine. But it's like this. And then it's just like, no, we can't do that. But anyway, yeah.
We're going to get it 2025. That's not even, to me, that's not even question. The question is honestly, do we get an announcement or a release by like in the early part of quarter one of the business fiscal year? I would at least an announcement, because there's no way the manufacturers are getting the schematics to this detail with a lead time longer than 6, at absolute most 9 months. So like the release has to be in, I would actually be surprised if the release was not in the first half.
Didn't the Switch launch in March though of the year that it came out?
I'm pretty sure, or it was at least announced, because I remember I was in Tokyo when it happened.
I remember they had a reveal in October, and then there was some big thing in January. And if my memory serves me right, it was either March or there we go. Because that was like when Chris and I were excited because Zelda, he got 2 copies or something that you did because you wanted that collector's edition. And here we are 8 years later. And one of the things that always I think is really cool about just what we've seen happen over the last 80 years. You have Sony and Microsoft just duking it out, the console wars, etc. And meanwhile, Nintendo's just doing their thing and winning. They actually finally surpassed the PS2 lifetime sales. And I think that's exciting to see, but it's crazy that it took so long to break that record. But I do think they're cheating slightly because I only had one PlayStation 2. I have probably purchased at least 4 Nintendo Switches, so there's a multiplier when it comes to that console.
I wish there was a way to do adjusted for inflation for console ownerships. Like you can't, but the reason why I say that is because the PlayStation 2 went out of manufacturing service when gaming was still relative, not a niche hobby by any means, but it was mainstream, but it was still, in what I would express as like the teenage years of gaming.
Yeah.
And so gaming has just become so much more popularized and multi-generational now that it's almost like the PS2 still impresses me. And I feel like if there was a way to adjust for inflation, whatever that would mean within that context, it would still be much more competitive with the Switch. But no, the Switch 2 is going to sell gangbusters, I'm sure.
Chris, what do you think it's going to be happening this spring, or are we going to have to wait and see something for the fall for this console?
It feels weird that they haven't given us a date if it's this spring. Like I would think they would want some level of lead time, but because I just don't think of a marketing company like Nintendo as being like, oh, well, we don't need to market because of the leaks. So it seems like they would have some sort of marketing lead time baked in. And so the fact that we haven't heard a date from them makes me think that it's like a summer release.
Yeah.
And that gives them time to sell out the original stock and then hopefully have more on the way for it being the hottest item of Christmas.
Right. Because we know that we won't
it doesn't need to be an
Xbox. We won't see an Xbox until at least 2026. That's kind of what's expected or kind of predicted. So they could literally dominate in terms of hardware this year alone. They could be hey, this is the new hardware. Everybody's been waiting around for this. I do hope it ends up being in the spring because of what you just said, by being able to sell out of the stock, being able to then restock. And so that by the time Christmas rolls around, It's not like they've only made 4 million. It's like, no, we've had time to be able to ramp up production and make sure we have enough that's getting this getting out of the gate. So
I do think we're definitely looking at a minimum quarter, like fiscal quarter. Like I wouldn't be surprised if the March you see the announcement and then a summer release. I think is the safe bet.
It'll be interesting. It's going to be, honestly, I'm really looking forward to it. I really do hope it launches with the new Mario, whether it's Odyssey 2 or like they do Galaxy 3 or something like that.
They named it 2, man. You're going to see some 2s. You're going to see Odyssey 2. You're going to see, if the pass.
Well, if they name it 2. I'm still rooting for Super Nintendo Switch, like as the name.
I think all the bits and bobs that we've seen from the leaks, which barely even leaks at this point, but I think it's going to be Switch 2.
Now, Striker says it beat the U.S. sales, not the total sales. Thank you, Striker. I thought I must have misread that. So I guess they're still slowly climbing their way up to the top of that chain.
Well, and the DS has a beat anyways, like by a long shot. Like that's the thing that a lot of people forget to mention is that yes, we tend to think of handhelds as different, but if you actually look at DS sales, it's insane.
Well, I mean, it kind of ties into it. It's like, is Switch a console? Yes. It's also a handheld, and it's that handheld nature is one of the things that I say it's like they've got that multiplier really applied because we got a couple of lights here in the house. I got one Switch that was thrown up on, and I got the other original Switch that I got that's still running strong to this day outside of the Joy-Con issues.
Right. And the thing that Nintendo has going for them there is that they've confirmed it's fully backwards compatible. And that's going to serve them incredibly well. That's going to
serve incredibly well. And since they made that announcement, I've actually purchased more games on the Switch than I had because I was like, okay, I'll get my Nintendo game, but then it's like, oh, I'll pick up this Square Enix game. I'll pick up this game. Like it ends up being something where it becomes way more. I'm just like, all right, cool. As long as my purchases are respected, then I will happily fund.
Man, that would be quite the rug pull.
It would.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I'll say too is not that Nintendo loves it, but the emulation for a lot of the Switch games have shown that what happens when you run them at even just 1080p, full 60, they can be way already beautiful design games look real pretty. Have you ever seen like Breath of the Wild running at 4K 60 or even just 1080p 60? So I think if the backwards compatibility also allows for a consistent 1080 60 for something for Switch games, that's also just going to make it's going to make the Switch 2 the way to play them, not just a way to play them.
Yeah. Well, we'll find out hopefully here in the very near future. One of the things I do like about what Nintendo's been doing last year was they kept making announcements for Nintendo Direct and said, there's no Switch 2 news here. Like, we're going to just get out in front of it. We're not going to sit here and get you expected. So if that trend continues, because we should be seeing an Xbox showcase pretty soon, a Switch showcase. So I would think would be in the very near, or hopefully our very near future, but time will tell. But let's pivot over into MMORPG kind of news discussion. Lots really kind of happened. I would describe it as kind of like a big nothing, like just not a lot of noise, not a lot of excitement. I haven't seen a lot of people talking about it, but one video did actually finally float up into my feed. It's from Narc, who's been covering pretty extensively Ashes of Creation, announcing that he's stepping away from the game, and it just launched here in the fall into early access. I have tried to play Ashes of Creation as somebody who has access, but its limited window really restricts me. So I have it installed. I have connected to the game. I have tried to play, and I have had to step away from it, which is unfortunate. So I don't have any hands-on experience, but I'm not surprised by this news. Chris, I sent you a text about this because it's like, all right, like we were talking about this years ago. What do you think?
He enjoys games the opposite the way I do. Like he's so driven by the hype and the copium and drinking his Coca-Cola that it doesn't surprise me that a game couldn't live up to 4 years of like 2,000 videos about all the things it was and was not going to be. It's actually why I don't get on the hype train, because it just sets you up to be mad. Like it just does. And it just looks like such a huge fall, like that he's invested so much in that community. But if that's how he enjoys games, that's great. And maybe he'll just go get hyped about like, what's the next game? It's got to be something so far out right now. It's just a title. Like, what's that far out there that he can get 4 years of
the Riot
posting again?
MMO?
The Riot MMO, yeah.
MMO. You have
Great.
Pixel Castle, which was Ghostcrawler, who went from the Riot MMO to founding this MMO that he's working. So there's lots of what I always kind of think of in this situation, Chris. These are perfect MMOs because they're so ethereal that everything that you ever wanted in a game can be into this game that is years away that we know nothing about. And so you can build up
expectations can be up here as long as the amount we know is down here.
Yeah.
The more we know, the more you can't just have expectations. You just need to live in reality. And there's a point where like everybody's lines cross.
And I remember like this was true even in the like Wild Stars, Elder Scrolls Online, Star Wars: The Old Republic. Even when those things were coming out, it was true then. And I think it reminds me very much of that like late 2000s, early 2010s era of MMOs coming out, where it's just like I don't want to critique people for how they want to enjoy things, but it gets to a point where I think people are more about riding the high of the hype than they actually are interested in the game, because they never every time you stick with the game for like all of a couple weeks to a month and then move on to the next thing,
which he had slowly slipped away from his like entertaining intros to just covering it like a normal game. Like he was going to just be this like Mr. Happy of that space where he was just going to be known for being like this immense resource, which is, it's an incredible place to be. It's very hard to get to. And unless you screw up, usually the person that is first kind of really holds that spot for a very long time. You kind of age into it. And so like, but that doesn't mean he wanted to be that person. Right. And so he's talked about in the video, he talked about like wanting to go back to making entertaining stuff again, which seemed to motivate him in the first place. And back when it was just like, some guy with a lot of money says he's going to make the best game and he says a lot of real dumb stuff when he covers it. It was an inherently entertaining thing to watch.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of when people it reminds me when people are entertained more about the conversation around a movie or than anyone actually going to see the film itself, you know, kind of
Morbius. It's Morbin time.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, Asmongold said, and he was kind of watching and reacting. So he had a big video. It was like 3 hours long. I was just kind of listening to that passively. He talked about, obviously, and this is something that he said that I was like, oh, I need to talk about this with Chris, because you brought up the MLM mindset. That's how Stephen Sharif really kind of built his business, made his money. And that's one of the things that he's doing with Ashes of Creation. I have a referral code. All these people have referral codes. That's one thing I didn't find very enjoyable about Narc's video, is that he did in a kind of a big old swath, and people with referral codes, like, you shouldn't trust them and things like that. And I'm like, I just signed up. I put the link. I'm not worried about it, but I was just like, well, that was an interesting kind of like, kick the cat on your way out of the door mindset. But the LMM is something Chris brought up to me, like, as a real concern. It's that, like, if this is just a funding strategy, it's a good one, but we know that what he's using that FOMO to get people to put that money in so that then they can now actually play the alpha somewhat. And it was inevitable people are going to be disappointed. But do you have any concerns about Steven, based off of everything that's kind of transpired?
I don't have any concerns. You couldn't go back to a clip of me with a man bun saying 4 years ago. Like, it just, there's nothing new here. The only difference is that the curtain's been lifted for everybody. And there were people that were willing to create their own narrative in the absence of fact. But it never made sense to me, to somebody that made this much money on MLMs and described his own experience in MLMs as not really MLMs, like, and did all this sort of like, this isn't a pyramid scheme. It's like an upward triangle. Like, he did all the same dodging that tells me he doesn't think MLMs are faulty. So he's going to use it again. He thinks of them as very fair and balanced because he made a ton of money off of his first one at a really young age. He was already very wealthy. And then, of course, got to be in the foundation of a bunch of other pyramids that came up out of the ground. So, and then went into real estate, which is a phenomenal way to make money for people that have money. And so, like, his view of money is different than people that use gaming as an escape, or people that use gaming as a low budget form of entertainment. And that's not all gamers. There are plenty of gamers that have tons of money, but there is a section of gaming that use this as, when I compare it to other hobbies that I have, hour of joy per dollar, gaming is relatively affordable. And when I look at even like my wife having an interest in sewing, or my friends that have an interest in things like triathlons, or, you know, going and doing gravel races, or going camping, in even, gosh, fishing. My friends that are into fishing and golf, like those look like two incredibly expensive hobbies. Gaming is pretty cheap for what it is.
And it super depends on your expectation, right? Because if you're, let's say, 11, you got no money, the amount of free-to-play options you have is insane. The amount of like, if you are not frustrated by microtransactions, for instance, your expectation for the amount of things you can do for free is insane.
You get Minecraft, for example, because you bring up an 11-year-old. I'm going to have an 11-year-old this year. And the kids, they are into Minecraft, and they're doing all kinds of crazy things that I've only seen Chris do, and I don't know what's going on.
I mean, Minecraft is basically infinite Lego. Like, what if you got
exactly? But it's interesting because we've discovered all these different kinds of like crazy rule sets, like single block that you mine over and you build out the world as you go, and like all these interesting things. And there's been a couple things I've ended up buying, a couple like world packs. They had Sonic that just recently dropped after taking my kids to see the movie. I was like, okay, sure, you got $7 more. But the amount of hour per, especially because it's multiplied by 4, because we didn't have to buy any additional copies. We already had it as a part. Like, I got it on the Xbox or Game Pass, about 1 copy on the Switch. I was like, all right, all in, where I'm $47 into this game, and the kids have already racked up hundreds and hundreds of hours over the course of the holidays. And I was like, wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I just think that somebody like Stephen Sharif has a very different view of what fair and unfair is. And that's fine. The world can be viewed through a lot of different lenses, but that means that you're setting up the gap between reality and expectation to be very, very far. And now the game is real. And there are a lot of people that have whiplash because they thought he was going to be some savior, when there was just no evidence that he was going to be. Their biggest evidence was the absence of fact.
I mean, I think the 2 takeaways, right, on that are, one, exactly to your point, that you look at, it's okay to have that be what your expectation is for your game. Just make that very clear so that the people who can engage on that level and want to can do. But I think the other thing that shows is how much people want. I mean, I don't even know if it's just a savior, but I think the amount of people who really want a fair experience, right? And fair is a charged word.
Fair is an incredibly charged word. There are a lot of people that are not upset about the Brutosaurs.
No, not at all. In fact, they love it, right? But I think there's a lot of people who want an experience that everyone can meaningfully engage on. Now, that's hard, right? Because what happens when you've got money versus time, right? So if you're someone who can't make a bunch of money, but you do have more time, that also puts you in a primacy experience over someone who has a lot of money but not a lot of time. And how do you,
Back in the Final Fantasy 11 days, it was like, it was like kids and almost dead. Like, there was a phrase for it and it's escaping my mind. It's basically retired. And I think, Chris, they had a similar expression for WoW, but it was like, oh, you're retired? Of course you can grind out all day. Oh, you don't have a job? Like, there's this gap of pre-20 and then post-60, and then these two groups, coming together for these like really long play sessions.
I don't know. I don't understand why people are this upset, because it just looked like everything that's come out of that game is what it was going to be. So far, it looks to have delivered exactly on his promises. Yeah,
it's still an alpha, that's, and I know a lot of people like get frustrated, and because I'm not using that as an excuse, but it's like they still have a long way. I think the people who are really frustrated are the ones who were telling me this game was coming out in 2020, and I was like, there's no way this is coming out 2020. And I was like, maybe 2020, I think I said 6 at the time, maybe 2028.
He adds another year of development of scope creep every time he talks publicly.
Yeah.
So unless he's going to be like, going to go into a secret chocolate factory and not talk to us for 20 years, the scope keeps growing.
Yeah.
At least it's not quite Phantasy Star Citizen, so there's something to that credit. I mean, I guess the thing to me is there's three possibilities there, right? Or a couple possibilities. One of which is you either have people who are maybe younger than us, or maybe even our age, who are just not as tapped in terms of watching these trends play out over and over, or having been a part of a project where that you've seen that happen before.
Right.
So it's just that if you don't have experience, like there's always new people coming in who are they're going to be their learning experience, right? Alternatively, will fill ignorance, which is, some people are just, they've seen it a bunch of times, but they're just not learning the pattern. And I think for some people, it's just like they probably want. And some people, this is may willful ignorance, but it's that they so want the thing, right? Not even the thing they're imagining, but they just want the thing. So they're kind of like not. They've got blinders of just wanting the thing to be real already. I've definitely seen that happen. Even people I know who better than this. You should stop buying into not even hype train, but just stop thinking that what you want to be real is real. What you want to be true is true.
It's hard because there's an element that these games do kind of need that hype to really kind of reach the scale that you need to be able to pick up. Like the last time I think we've actually seen an MMO launch with insane scale was you have like Lost Ark, which pushed it. Oh, maybe even we could make the argument, and this would be an interesting kind of debate. New World and Lost Ark, massive numbers, right in like New World, which is a paid MMO, right under 1 million concurrent. Lost Ark hitting a little bit over. But then you have Throne of Liberty, another free to play, I think hitting around 400,000 this last year. And so there feels like there's also been this real clawback of people's interest in these kind of ongoing and live service games, and that's where it's like, I wonder if we will see those kind of highs like we did, or if this is our new norm.
Well, the thing that's worth pointing out about like New World and Lost Ark is how correlated and close they are into COVID, right? Like, yes, at the tail end, but they're still in that boom. And I don't think that can be completely discredited from the point. I do think, though, I feel like I've definitely borne witness to maybe not necessarily classic MMO desire, but definitely a persistent experience desire. I feel like I've seen more of lately. I don't know how, I know how to quantify it, but like this feeling of a game that can be not necessarily the forever game, but a game that is like a world,
I think with people jumping game to game, though, I wonder where that comes from, because like I just consume games differently. Like to me, the advantage of a persistent world is that I can invest in it. But if you're going to keep investing in the next one, how much does persistent matter from like my view of what the word persistent represents? And so I think I just consume them differently than the crowd.
Maybe I should reframe it. I feel like I have witnessed more people like you, or at least people transitioning to playing games a little bit more like you. Now, maybe that's just because the people in my world are getting older. So,
I mean, it's that is how what I feel like it's been like for me for the last like 6 months. I was like, yeah, I told you guys in the pre-show I've been playing some Pantheon. I've touched a couple of games here and there, but my ability to play games has like dramatically restricted because I've been so busy with so many other moving things, like with the kids and activities and all these things. All that's good stuff, but I was like, oh man. And so it's to the point where it's like, if this game cannot be played in a handheld style way, like I was saying, I got Pantheon running on the Steam Deck. Okay, that actually means I can put time into this game, as opposed to like if it can only be played in one spot, then that's just not going to work for me and where I'm at in my life. That's Ash as a creation right now. Can't don't have that that functionality that I can do, and maybe I could hack it to get it on the Steam Deck, but there's not I don't have a huge desire to do that. Pantheon was great because it was just click play and then kind of configure the controller, ready to go. And so I was like, all right. That's a real like, plus, so that's where I'm kind of looking at it. It's like, I think if you want to try and capture kind of, I guess, our age range, our group, it's like you got to become accessible. It cannot be isolated to where you have to go off on your own, because chances are there are people who have that. But I think the vast majority of gamers at scale are just out in the world working to try and make ends meet, or doing whatever they can to get it rocking and rolling. And very few actually are these content creators like, like Chris who did that, like, full time for a long time. And that opened up so many things that you could do. And that experience gap between, somebody who can do that versus not, like, it's interesting. And I think that's where a lot of the drama kind of kicks up from somebody who was like, oh, if I, if I was a content creator, if I was a full-time streamer, I would do this, and this. And you see somebody, not, and it's like, oh, all right, that's interesting. I think it's just fundamentally interesting to see how that plays out. Speaking of,
sorry, go ahead.
No, speaking of kind of like a little bit of drama, I've been seeing, and I'd like to get Elio's kind of take on this. I've been seeing lots of little posts pop up here and there, kind of talking about Final Fantasy XIV falling below 1 million active subscribers. And we never really get these true numbers. So my first thing was like, all right, like
what's that exactly based off of?
But at the same time, I'm both not surprised because we've seen so many things. We talked about this a couple of shows. Like Endwalker was this real kind of like set piece, some kind of set in time. They're doing this rebuilding aspect. I always thought that this time period would be where Final Fantasy XIV really struggles the most to try and find its new identity, what it's trying to be. And you got a lot of people who have the previous expectations of the saga, the changes, and whether they like that or they don't. But also going into a year where there isn't an expansion, I get so fatigued with all the news articles and posts. And it's not just for Final Fantasy, but it's the games as a service thing. It's like, can you believe that this game had all of these players and now it turns out they only have a fraction of it? Are they profitable? Oh yeah, wildly so. Well, then who cares? Anyway.
Yeah. I have like a lot of ideas, so sorry if I go a little long on this one.
Please go ahead.
There's like 6 things to say, and I hope I really do not come across to start with as expressing that if people are being critical, they're wrong or silly or something. I think there's a lot of justifiable critiques from a lot of different levels, but I think one thing is part of this. This is the first patch cycle that a lot of people who came in during the WoW Exodus and the end tail of Shadowbringers are really all completely caught up and experiencing a full patch cycle. On top of that, the 6.x patch cycle was a distinct entity unto itself, whereas the 7.x is back to the like Stormblood, Shadowbringers, Heaven's Word, 0.1 through 0.3 is an epilogue, and 0.4 through 0.5 is, set up. And that's the story alone, but that also kind of affects how the patches feel.
Yeah. On
top of that, people always, a huge amount of people always take an enormous break either between patches or once the 0.0 comes out until the next expansion's coming out. They don't do any of the patches.
Still the 0.55 or something like that. Yeah. And they're like, yeah.
Nothing that's happening right now, nothing at all is abnormal or out of like what the expected delta of change would be, to be frank. So any like doom saying is just wrong. Now, they're not wrong to be critical of the fact that there's not preeminent content that's repeatable in the 0.1 patches. That's not having cosmic explorations, cult crescent, any of that. So a bunch of stuff that people can do. That is a problem. People are not wrong that Dawn Trail itself is somewhat divisive in terms of like having people not liking the story for X or Y reason. I think a lot of the reasons sometimes people give are, I don't connect with it, so this thing's the reason why. And I think a lot of times they're misattributing the problem, but that's its own conversation. I think there are some justifiable criticisms, but I also think that part of it is like you repeatedly get to 6.0 is the end of the first arc of the story. Arguably, there's a really strong argument to be made that 7.on is effectively Final Fantasy 14 too. Mm-hmm. That's obviously a little bit incorrect, but it's the sentiment I think helps frame it a little bit better. I think within the looking at, we're setting our first footsteps towards a new arc, not only from a narrative standpoint, but from like trying to make, they're making a lot of good choices. Now, a lot of the choices are not paying off in the short term or maybe even the medium term. I think a lot of the choices they're making are kind of hampering them in those ways. And I think a lot of people are frustrated with that because there has not been enough short-term thinking in some ways for 14. It feels like at times. And I think the people who particularly are experiencing their now maybe second or at most third year with the game, particularly like second year of the game, are now experiencing the frustration of this game's incredibly consistent and I want it to instead surprise me. Again, I don't want to boil anything down to just any of these metrics, but it's having played now for 5 or 6 years. I'm seeing a trend line that is not just in their development, but in the player base that it has repeated. I think it's particularly noisy this time, and I think a part of that goes back to the amount of people the amount of people and the amount of who joined in around COVID times, and particularly the people who were coming from other games with different expectations. It's not that simple, but I think that's an element.
We had a lot of people. I don't want to call any out by name because I think that would take away from the point I'm trying to make, and not who was making it, that experienced emotional highs during COVID. From Shadowbringers to Endwalker, the game was in an emotional state, but throughout, when the world locked us all inside and we all shared games and we shared these Twitch events together, both on the content creation and the content consumption side, we had communities that became very fervent and made some very bold promises. Hearing people say things, "You'll never get tired of this game. I'll never run out of things to do in this game. Anybody who runs out of things to do in this game or burn out, they're just not looking for the content." And they would just make these big, bold statements that couldn't really easily be backed down from. And then within 6 months, a year, or 2 years, they experienced the other side of that feeling. And that didn't make the people who experienced it first right. That didn't make the people who experienced it second right. But you have a lot of people that are through different parts of that emotional journey. And 14 in particular lets you kind of get through that journey at your own pace, because due to the lack of surprise, there's never a moment that kind of like immediately snapshots us all to the same feeling. As opposed to something like WoW, where like WoW Classic launches, and regardless of your stage of burnout, everybody's in a good and excited state again. And when something like Shadowlands happens, everybody, regardless of state, is equally pissed off. And so like, you don't have that. Everybody gets to go through their own pace. It's like going through one of these like little Christmas light shows where you all walk through at different times, and everybody has a different start time. And we all get to the same end destination, but we all get to either walk fast or walk slow. We all experience it. So like with 14, we could probably, if we all sat down and really planned it out, we could probably make a segment right now, and we could just air it every year to 2 years. We could just air it over and over and over and over. Because it's this exact same thing will be said during 8.1
yes.
and 9.1 and 10.1. And the game still has enough of a following and enough of a commercial presence that those are still very likely expansions that will exist.
Historically, I've always felt like we saw the level of frustration within the playing active community happen around the 0.3 patch. But with Endwalker, I think we ended up seeing that shift more into the kind of the 0.1. So this would be where, there's usually a lot of frustration. Also, I think the longer patch cycles have kind of contributed to that like earlier sense of burnout and fatigue, because you didn't actually have to wait so long until the 0.2 patch. And then all of a sudden you're like, hey, I'm doing the next raid and we're ready to rock and roll. This is exciting again. And so I think those things have contributed to the level of frustration that is at play within the game. I do wonder what this 0.3 patch will do in terms of both reception and community sentiment, because right now it feels like, and maybe it's just my YouTube feed. Right now, it feels like community sentiment is way down. People are frustrated or fatigued, and they're actually venting this out. Where I think historically, like somebody was saying, like Zeppela has been, pretty negative on the game, and I was like, I haven't seen a Zeppela video in a long time, but I was like, oh, okay, that doesn't surprise me. I always just kind of think that's just the natural trajectory, especially within content creation, that you got to be aware of. But that all being said, is that 0.3, there is a promise that there's going to be substantially more content because they have been limitedly restricted. But 0.3 is actually going to be a patch that might actually offer more mounts, more things, more content to do. And that is kind of what I'm waiting on. I just want to see what that actually looks like, because it was a bullet point on a presentation. But what does that really mean? And we still have a long way to go until 0.3 because of the longer patch cycle. We're talking this fall, maybe.
Yeah, I don't think you have to wait that long. I think you're going to look at. I think a lot of sentiment is going to shift to some extent, at least in terms of the amount of mid-core content when Cult Crescent in particular comes out. I think having an exploration zone is going to change things. I think if Cosmic Exploration comes out in the 0.2 or the 0.25, which we'll see, but I think that's going to help. Cosmic Exploration is basically, did you guys do Ishgard Restoration or any of that?
A little bit. I touched on it, and it was, I know Chili like mainlined it because he was competing for like the various different rankings, which was exciting to see. Like, that's the thing. Like, I love these community coming together to do things. So I did participate a little bit, but I didn't participate in the sense that I ever was frustrated.
Yeah, I think so. I think point two honestly has the potential to solve a lot of those problems in and of itself if a lot of those things happens. I think Mr. Happy's been making this point for a long time, and I've been in utter agreement that the problem is they need to move things up. They need to move grindable. I don't even like the term grindable. Repeatable content that is mid-core or lower to the 0.1, and they've never done that.
No,
and they kind of need to. And I understand why they don't, because one, they're sprinting to get across the finish line with the MSQ with the 0.0. They need that buffer periods for the 0.1 to be, because that comes out not, like I get.
And historically they haven't needed to. Historically, there's been a pile of people that have things they didn't finish yet. They're not Omni. They don't have their relic. But you're starting to have people who said they'd never be an Omni. You're starting to have people who said they'd never have more than one relic, So like they're immediately hungry.
Well, and I see that. I also see people who I see absolutely that. Then that's kind of like the year 2 or year 3 people that in part that I'm talking about. But I also see a lot of people coming in who I know you were bemoaning people being like, oh, if you say there's not content, it's just because you don't, But I do think there's a large subset of people that I've repeatedly experienced personally, where if you actually get them to try something they don't think that they'll like, Bosnia or whatever, EXs, whatever it is, you do give them a whole nother 100 hours to play or more, right?
Yeah, I've often thought about just like, if I was currently subscribed, jumping in back into Eureka, because it's like that is some content that I haven't finished, and then I was like, I really enjoyed. And then it always just kind of reminds me of Final Fantasy 11. And I'm like, man, I miss Final Fantasy 11. Let me go see what's going on with that game. So it kind of trips up, my attention a little bit.
I think sentiment being negative is absolutely real. I think it being in a particularly dour place. I guess my lack of doomerism, one, comes from a general overly positive attitude on this. But secondly, I think the fact that I was ready for this coming off the back of 6.0. I'm like, this 6.0 hit perfectly. Not only is there no way 7.0 is going to follow up, it's not even just expectations, but it's like 7.0 was never going to win, basically.
Yeah.
I was never expecting it to, even if it nailed everything. And so this sentiment, I don't mean to say that people are just bitching, but also I think there's a certain amount that like it's all of the frustrations that have accrued from everything before this just manifesting themselves and laying themselves plain.
Yeah.
And so we'll get through this and it's going to be fine. I think a lot of it, some of it's good feedback, right? And I think a lot of it hopefully gets to where it's going. I think a good example of a recent thing I'm frustrated with is Chaotic Alliance raids, right? The fact that it's savage content rather than extreme content, effectively, that it is savage level, is a problem. One, because of the amount of people that it requires to play it, and two, because you have an inordinate amount of players who are all mid-core, who are just not getting to meaningfully engage with this content because it's just high enough above either what their skill ceiling is or the people around them that they can get together to try and do it. And I think that's a bit of a problem.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how this year kind of plays out, because I'm not expecting big hype because there's no FanFest. There's no, like this is going to be it's just the AB year. And so I just was like, oh, I'm seeing some negative. I'm just very curious to see what you guys thought about it, because I think we're all kind of in agreement. It's like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
All right. Like, keep having fun. It's
going to be a passing thing, I think. Or I think some of those frustrations are going to linger unless specifically addressed. But I think as long as, and not even like a, peaks and valleys, but I just think that like if 0.2 addresses at least some of these things or makes people feel like there's, more to do or, can bite into it better, I think that'll do a lot. And I also think that the 0.1 through 0.3 will, I don't want to say make people like Dawntrail's story more, but I think people forget the degree to which the 0.1 through 0.3 is like fundamental to the story. Like think about Heavensward, where Heavensward ends off and without 1 and 0.3.
Yeah.
There are people that literally wait for the 0.3 for that reason, right?
Yeah.
That if there is a TV show you like, but you don't like the way they do cliffhangers, or you don't like how slow the mainline plot is weaved through these individual episodic plots, one of the solutions is wait until the season is complete and then binge it. And for many people, that's a more enjoyable experience. And so the chance to binge this story, its kind of partial completion is 0.3, historically speaking, and binge it in its entirety in 0.5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Unless we get a late winter FanFest, I don't think we'll be getting a FanFest this year, or unless they're breaking their typical schedule, because there's no way. Because we're gonna get the 0.2 in March, probably, or April 1st. We're gonna get, then from there we're gonna see a July or August 0.3, and we wouldn't see a FanFest until 0.4 was out for sure, and that's not going to be until first part of 2026.
I didn't budget any PTO for it this year.
Yeah,
it was not on my list.
Yoshi P did hint that they've got plans for events, but like literally that could be, they're bringing the fireworks show to America, you know, like
I would love, they like Square Enix has such a library of games. There's just a beautiful like thing that, yes, FanFest is historically wrapped on the expansion for the next Final Fantasy 14, story piece. Man, how cool would it be if they had that yearly Square Enix Fest in which that it's like, yeah, we're going to get some Final Fantasy news. We're going to get some news about upcoming games. We're going to but I guess just the cost and trying to coordinate that across multiple countries, like is, I guess obviously they've maybe run the numbers and they don't, find that it's worth their time.
I think you'd also find that the amount of Square Enix fans is lower than the amount of individual fans. I think, for instance, there's a lot of 14 people who wouldn't necessarily attend a Square Enix fan fest. I think you have a lot of people who, if you had a Final Fantasy VII fest, you'd have a bunch of people who wouldn't go to Square Enix Fest. So, and I don't think it's not enough that nobody would go or wouldn't be worth attending, but for the amount of hassle. And then you also think you have to then get all the creatives. Not only, so like if you're Square Enix, right, you have to get Yoshi P and Nomura, and like you're basically taking all your teams to try and go to an event.
I think it would be really hard for me with my new job to justify going annually. And I like that they've been able to make FanFest bigger each time. And it doesn't mean there aren't people that get blocked out each time from buying tickets, but I do like that they have continually aimed for bigger and bigger venues, in hopes that people who can afford to take that time and money and make it a priority can get an opportunity to go. Because not everybody that wants to go gets to go.
Brian, to your point, a second FanFest, now I don't even know what that would be, because if you're not announcing expansion stuff, what exactly are you talking about? But at the same time, if there was a off-year FanFest that was smaller in each place, that could go a long way towards helping the problem of the amount of people who get to go. And maybe what you do is you do the off year is a lot more of the interviews with, the sort of things that you see at PAX and elsewhere, where you get interviews.
Yeah, and then you also, that's a good point, because like with PAX, like there are like various different kind of events that do go on, and Square Enix has made a bigger push to be a part of them. Maybe they'll get something out in Australia now that they have a data center out there. That could be really interesting. Or maybe it's not like a global thing. It's like, well, this off year we're gonna have a kind of a thing that we're gonna do in Tokyo or Europe, or so where it's just one event. And yes, that means that as an American, the likelihood of me going to those would be very low. But then occasionally, just like the Olympics, it comes back around to to somewhere that you can take a part in.
Korea and FanFest China, that's not nothing. That really is something. So and it goes a long way. If we start assuming that those are part of actually the, those in some ways are the off-year FanFest now.
All right. That was a great way to kick off the new year discussion and news-wise. I think it's, if we've got a little bit of time left, I'd like to play our first game of 20 questions to kick off 2025. I've got the game. And if anybody needs to go, Chris, I know we're almost at time.
We need to get a page up.
Get a page up, guys.
I got my apps ready to go.
Perfect. Awesome. So for those of you who are new, we've been playing 20 questions. We didn't do it like every show of 2024, but it ended up being, I think, one of the most fun moments where one of us brings a game that we have in here, and everybody else has 20 yes or no questions to ask to try and figure out what this game could be. So I've got the game. You guys got 20 questions. I'll keep count. The show and the floor is up to you. I'm going to try to keep this segment to 10 minutes, just heads up. So I might speed you guys along so we don't end up having, I think we had a 30-minute 20 questions one day.
What was it published before January 1st of the year 2000?
Before, yes, it was published before January 1st of the year 2000.
Okay. Was it on a Nintendo console?
It was on a Nintendo console.
Okay.
I might not need the 10-minute restriction.
Okay. Was it first party?
No, it was not first party.
Okay, so that puts us down to the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and 64.
And chat, feel free to guess. We like to do a little fun thing. We won't highlight you guys if you get it right in chat, but
do we want to try to get the console?
It was on a Nintendo console. Yeah,
we want to refine it. Was it on the Nintendo 64?
Okay.
It was not on the Nintendo 64.
Okay. Was it on the original Nintendo or the Super Nintendo?
Yes, it was on the original Nintendo or the Super Nintendo. What? Yeah. I'm just trying to make sure I have my logic correct.
Yeah, that would. I think that helps us do more with a question, right? So
I hopefully I didn't throw
Game Boys and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Yeah, good point. Yeah, good point. I didn't think about that.
Okay. You want to do like publisher maybe?
Yeah. What were some publishers for the Super Nintendo? There's Capcom. Now I'm first party because that could be. There's a lot of options there during that period. Watch it be an LJN game. Well, original Square Enix was originally. Was it published by SquareSoft, Square Enix? It
was. It was.
Okay. So we've got Dragon Quest, we've got Final Fantasy. There's also some other ones. Also, okay, I kind of want to, it's not a question, but I kind of want to ask, like, is this going to be a bullshit thing where I tried to say, is it Final Fantasy 6? And you're like, no, because it's Final Fantasy 3 or something.
I wouldn't do that to you.
Okay.
I might ask for a clarification.
Okay.
Which version are you talking about?
Okay.
American or Japanese?
Sure. Well, okay, I'm going to is it a Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest game?
It is not.
Okay.
Not Dragon.
He said, is it a Final Fantasy or a Dragon Quest game? And,
it's not either of those.
Either of those.
That's a huge chunk of games knocked out.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm thinking, what would Brian think of that's not one of those? Secret of Mana? Maybe? Yeah, I know he likes that.
Oh, dude. I love me some Secret of Mana.
Yeah, unless he's picking something really obscure.
I know, that's what I'm worried about. And there are a lot of weirdly obscure games that came out from Squaresoft.
Oh, dude, yeah. This was an era to...
Yeah.
Okay, so should we further narrow down year?
Sure. Do you want to split it? Well, how do you want to split it, though? Do you want to split basically before 95?
So I think we're talking between 85 and 96.
Yeah, so let's do 94 because that's when the majority of SNES and NES games.
Okay. Was it published on or after January 1st of 1994?
It was.
Okay. I see. Now I'm thinking Chrono Trigger because that's a Toriyama. That's. But how do you frame Chrono Trigger that also removes other options? I've got one. Has this game ever been remastered or ported to a future handheld or console?
It has.
Okay, so that could be Chrono Trigger. That could be Super Mario RPG. Oh, those are both.
Okay. Breath of Fire, Final Fantasy, Live Alive, Front Mission, Chrono Trigger, Seiken Densetsu, Secret of Evermore.
I'm going to start going for titles because I think we're not going to refine it much more from here.
Unless you think the genre can do it.
Wait.
Do these break into different genres?
Well, no, because they're almost all RPGs is the problem.
Okay.
Almost everything they produce at the time. Is it Chrono Trigger?
It is Chrono Trigger.
Hey, let's
in 10 questions, record time, a real strong win.
I think it was
starting it off.
I think it was also like 3 minutes.
Yeah, that's what I was like when y'all were like, I was like, oh, maybe they're gonna get to this real quick. And y'all did. You all did not disappoint. That was a great strategy. It's a great strategy. I played that one really well. I thought it would be fun to kick off the year with any kind of reference to Chrono Trigger. It's an absolute freaking gem.
Someone said just have a frogman in it, and that's the best way to ask if it's Chrono Trigger.
Right. And so, exactly. So Postman asking that. Nobody in chat named the game. Postman guessing Banjo-Kazooie early on. So no golden imaginary Stadia controller. Do I still? Yeah, I got them all down here on the floor. For the chat this time, but we'll be rolling through some 20 question games as well. If you guys got suggestions for games for 20 questions outside of just the panel bringing them, be sure to leave them like in the comments or shoot me up on them on DMs and stuff like that. That way we can keep it lively and we can shout out the people who if you do pick a game
that like the clue giver has played.
Yeah. It helps.
Yeah.
That way they can answer questions quickly, and that way it's also not something that's just so obscure.
Mario is Missing was like that was y'all's kryptonite last year, because I was like, I remember playing that game and being mad.
See, you know, the one that would really mess someone up is Hotel Mario, because that was on the CDI. So you'd be like, so that like, there's so many ways you ask like Nintendo questions that are like gonna, whoa, okay, so it can't be this and then this.
I know I'm the weird one in the group, because when I pick games that I think are like not wildly popular, but were still popular in my circle, you guys never get them. You guys are like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, oh, you guys don't play like every crappy racing game.
I've got one. I've got a fun one, maybe for the future.
You got a fun game? Okay.
But I won't say it in case it's me.
Next time you're able to make the show, I'll defer to you on having that, because that'll be a lot of fun. Because it's just this is fun. I like to play too occasionally. So.
Cool.
All right, guys. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Elio, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me over at the Eorzean Archives, where we put out videos semi-regularly. I've been off for about almost a year now, but my health is finally good, so I've been producing a whole bunch of content. There have been streams going on, and there'll probably be more streams, but actual content will be out there. You can also join our Discord at discord.gg/Eorzean Archives, where we talk about Final Fantasy XIV. It's mainly focused on that, obviously, but it's a good old time.
Chris, you said you were working on some stuff.
I am. My goal is to publish 12 YouTube shorts this year. So not a crazy big goal, but it's a format type that I'm not familiar with. So we're going to just kind of experiment with. It also looks like something that you can just kind of launch into the void, and like it doesn't immediately ping all your subscribers and stuff. So like, looks like I could launch it across a couple channels and kind of pull a Brian and see like a data point and see like who's watching this thing.
Yeah.
So, and I want to try making the first pieces of kind of lore content, because I've been planning out some of the lore stuff. So I want to try out some lore content.
Hell yeah.
So we'll give it a go.
That'd be cool. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you produce this year. For me, I've been, focusing more on some essays. So I think we're going to keep rocking and rolling the podcast. I don't know if we're going to try to hold ourselves to 52 or 50 is what we set for last year. But it was actually, we hit our goal, which was really, really quite outstanding. And I think you can kind of expect that the podcast will continue to roll out on Fridays, most likely 3 p.m. Central. That seems to be a time that works across all the platforms. I'm going to be working on some essays. We got some No Rest for the Wicked stuff right on the horizon that I am just itching for. And honestly, I'm really feeling Pantheon. Like there's this sense that like the fact that I got it up on the Steam Deck and working was enjoyable. I'll at some point make a video on it, but it is a grind. Like max level, I've got one character that's level 3 and one character that's level 2. And I think I would have to check Steam, and it's like I've put at least 5 hours into that game. So not necessarily the most efficient player, but it's still having an interesting time with it. I don't know. Maybe it's just my kind of, I like this. It's a nice slower pace kind of game that you can kind of chill with. But all right, guys, that's it for our show today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in live. And if you're watching this as a VOD, sound off in the comments with VOD Squad. Love hearing from the VOD Squad who enjoy these podcasts. And we will be back next week talking more games, news, and all kinds of good stuff. Till then, take care.